Rome was not built in a day. From a tiny speck on the map of Latium in 753 BC, a mighty empire began its journey. This small settlement would eventually write the greatest epic in human history, transforming from a humble town into the heart of a vast world power. Legend tells of twin brothers raised by a wolf, but reality saw a resilient people forge a city-state that refused to be conquered by its neighbors. In its infancy, Rome absorbed the surrounding tribes, slowly consolidating power across the Italian peninsula through a mix of diplomacy, alliance, and relentless military grit. Every step was a struggle for survival. The early Romans were farmers and soldiers, deeply committed to the protection and expansion of their growing home. The foundations of law and order were laid early, in as the city expanded its reach and its vision, looking far beyond the hills of central Italy. As the centuries passed, the red stain of Rome grew, eventually covering the entire boot of Italy, signaling the end of the early tribal era. The stage was now set. A local power was about to become a global titan, ready to challenge the greatest civilizations of the ancient Mediterranean world. The era of the Republic was a time of iron and blood. Rome's citizen soldiers became the most disciplined fighting force the world had ever seen. To the south, the mighty Carthage stood as the ultimate rival. For over a century, these two powers would fight for total control of the sea. Hannibal Barca brought war to Rome's doorstep, crossing the Alps with his elephants in a daring move that nearly brought the Republic to its knees. But Rome's resolve was unbreakable. In the Senate, the cry "Carthage must be destroyed" echoed, fueling a total war that would change history forever. By the end of the Third Punic War, Carthage was erased from the map. Rome was now the undisputed master of the western Mediterranean basin. The Mediterranean became Mare Nostrum, our sea. Roman ships patrolled from Spain to the Levant, securing trade routes and ensuring total dominance of the waves. Turning its gaze east, Rome encountered the fragmented kingdoms of Alexander's successors. One by one, the storied lands of Greece and Macedonia fell to the legions. The rigid Greek phalanx was no match for the adaptable Roman maniples. Military innovation and sheer numbers allowed Rome to annex the cradle of civilization. Wealth and culture flowed back to the capital. Rome was no longer just a city. It was the center of a rapidly expanding international empire. However, this sudden wealth brought internal strife. The Republic began to fracture as powerful generals competed for ultimate control over the vast new territories. The transition from a republic to an empire was paved with civil war, but it would eventually lead to Rome's most glorious and stable era. By the middle of the 1st century BC, the Mediterranean was truly a Roman lake, setting the stage for the rise of the first emperor. Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, ending the Republic and setting the foundation for a new order. His victories in Gaul expanded Rome to the North Sea. After Caesar's fall, his heir Augustus became the first emperor. He brought an end to decades of civil war, ushering in the famous Pax Romana. The frontiers were stabilized along the great rivers of the Rhine and Danube. For the first time, the Roman world knew a consistent, lasting peace. This was the Golden Age. Architecture, art, and literature flourished as the capital became a marble marvel, the envy of every civilization on earth. Under Emperor Trajan in 117 AD, the empire reached its zenith, from the damp forests of Britain to the burning sands of the Persian Gulf. The empire now covered 5 million square kilometers. It held 1/5 of the entire human population under a single law and a single ruler. Trajan's successor, Hadrian, focused on defense, building massive walls to mark the limits of Roman power and keep the northern tribes at bay. The era of the 5 good emperors represented the peak of human governance in the ancient world, where wisdom and duty guided the state. Trade flourished like never before. Goods from China, India, and Africa flowed into Roman ports, connecting the world through a vast network of commerce. All roads led to Rome. Over 80,000 kilometers of paved highways acted as the arteries of the empire, moving troops and news at lightning speed. For the average citizen, life was stable. Education, public baths, and entertainment were available across the empire, from Londinium to Alexandria. Latin became the universal language of law and science, creating a shared intellectual heritage that would survive long after the empire itself faded away. Engineering was the Roman superpower. They conquered nature itself, bringing fresh water to millions through massive stone aqueducts that still stand today. But even during the height of Pax Romana, shadows were lengthening. The last of the good emperors, Marcus Aurelius, spent his reign fighting off invasions. The sun was beginning to set on the Golden Age. The immense size of the empire was becoming its greatest burden as new threats emerged. The 3rd century brought chaos. Civil war, plague, and economic collapse struck all at once, threatening to tear the Roman world into pieces. The empire fractured. In the west, the Gallic Empire broke away, while in the east, The wealthy Queen Zenobia of Palmyra carved out her own realm. Hyperinflation rendered the currency worthless, and the once mighty legions were now more interested in making emperors than defending the borders. Emperor Diocletian realized the empire was too big for one man to rule. He established the Tetrarchy, dividing power among 4 co-rulers. This administrative division saved the state for a time, but it also created a permanent rift between the Latin West and the Greek East. Internal power struggles continued to bleed the empire dry. For decades, Roman fought Roman, leaving the borders vulnerable to the gathering barbarian hordes. Then came Constantine. He reunited the empire under one banner and embraced a new faith, Christianity, that would forever change the Roman identity. Constantine moved the capital to the east, founding Constantinople. This new Rome was strategically placed, far wealthier and easier to defend than the old city. As Constantinople rose in glory, the original city of Rome began to languish. The center of gravity had shifted, leaving the West in the shadows. Bureaucracy became heavy and corrupt. Taxes rose to fund a massive army that was increasingly composed of the very barbarians Rome sought to exclude. The spirit of the Pax Romana was dead. People began to flee the cities, seeking protection on the fortified estates of the wealthy elite. External pressure became unbearable. Forced by the migrating Huns, Germanic tribes flooded into Roman lands no longer as immigrants, but as invaders. The Western Empire was failing. It lacked the money, the men, and the will to hold back the tide of the great migrations. The end was near. The division that was meant to save Rome had ultimately left its western half isolated and vulnerable to the final blow. By the late 5th century, the map of the West was a patchwork of Germanic kingdoms. The ancient dream was dying in its birthplace. In 410 AD, for the first time in 800 years, Rome was sacked. The unthinkable had happened. The eternal city was violated. 45 years later, the Vandals struck from the sea, stripping Rome of its remaining treasures. The city was a ghost of its former self. Finally, in 476, the barbarian general Odoacer deposed the last emperor. The Western Roman Empire had officially ceased to exist. The light of Rome in the West went out. Europe entered a new age of fragmentation, but the Roman legacy lived on in the East. This was Byzantium. While the West fell, the Eastern Roman Empire flourished, preserving the Greek and Roman knowledge that would one day spark the Renaissance. Emperor Justinian dreamed of restoring the empire's former glory. He launched a massive reconquest to take back Italy and Africa from the barbarians. For a brief moment, the Mediterranean was almost a Roman lake again. Justinian's generals, like Belisarius, performed military miracles on every front, but the cost was high. The plague of Justinian and endless wars exhausted the empire's resources, just as new enemies appeared on the horizon. In the 7th century, the rise of Islam brought a new challenger. Byzantium lost its wealthiest provinces, Egypt and Syria, in a few short decades. The empire survived, using secret weapons like Greek fire. Constantinople became a fortress, the shield of Christendom against the Eastern invasions. For centuries, the walls of Constantinople held firm. The city was the most sophisticated and populous in the Western world, a beacon of civilization. But the empire was in a slow, agonizing decline. It was hit by crusader betrayals, internal coups, and the rising power of the Ottoman Turks. The end was inevitable. By the 15th century, the empire that once spanned 3 continents was reduced to a single besieged city. In 1453, Sultan Mehmed II brought the largest cannons the world had ever seen to the gates of the Roman capital. The final emperor, Constantine XI, died fighting in the streets. The Roman Empire, after 1500 years, had finally reached its end. The fall of the city marked the end of the Middle Ages. The last vestige of the ancient world was gone, replaced by a new era. Though the empire vanished, its ghost remained. The modern map of Europe is built upon the very foundations that the Romans laid centuries ago. Our legal systems are rooted in Roman law. Concepts of citizenship, contracts, and justice are the intellectual inheritance of the Caesars and the Senate. The Romance languages, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian, are the living voices of Rome, spoken by nearly 1 billion people today. Look at our cities. The domes, arches, and columns of modern government buildings across the globe pay homage to the architectural genius of Rome. Even our infrastructure follows their lead. Many of Europe's main highways still sit directly on top of the stones laid by Roman legionnaires. Rome is more than just history. It is a warning and an inspiration. It shows how greatness is earned and how easily it can be lost. The blood of the empire flows through the veins of Western civilization. Its art, its philosophy, and its courage continue to shape our daily lives. The Roman story is our story, an epic of ambition, power, and the eternal search for order in a chaotic and ever-changing world. Thank you for joining CD Team on this journey through 15 centuries. The empire has fallen, but the legacy of Rome will endure forever.